There comes a moment in life when silence becomes louder than words, when your absence becomes more powerful than your anger, when your indifference becomes your greatest weapon. Today we're talking about one of the most powerful psychological shifts you can make. When you treat a narcissist like they're dead, you become their worst nightmare. Not with revenge, not with hate, but with emotional detachment. A narcissist survives on attention the way fire survives on oxygen. Without it, the flames shrink. With it, they grow uncontrollably. Attention is not just something they enjoy, it is something they psychologically depend on. Praise feeds their superiority. Arguments feed their sense of importance. Even your frustration feeds their ego because it proves they can still move you emotionally. In their mind, emotional reaction equals relevance. If you react, they exist powerfully in your world. This is why indifference unsettles them more than anger ever could. Anger is still engagement. Defending yourself is still engagement. Explaining your side is still engagement. When you argue, you are signaling that their opinion matters. When you try to prove them wrong, you are showing that their validation still has weight. Even tears can feel like victory to someone who thrives on control. Every emotional response confirms their influence. Emotional intelligence, a concept popularized by psychologist Daniel Goleman, teaches that self-regulation is the foundation of personal power. When you master your reactions, you control the dynamic. A narcissist expects you to react. They anticipate your defense, your anger, your explanations. It keeps the cycle alive. But when you offer nothing, no visible hurt, no counterattack, no justification, you interrupt their script. Silence becomes a boundary. Calm becomes resistance. Indifference becomes a mirror. They cannot manipulate. They may escalate at first. They may provoke harder, insult deeper, attempt to trigger jealousy, guilt, or fear. Why? Because they sense the oxygen thinning. The supply is fading. And when supplies fade, panic begins. Not always visible panic, but internal instability. They rely on your emotional energy to stabilize their fragile self-image. When you withdraw that energy, they are left alone with their insecurity. Attention is power. Wherever your focus goes, energy flows. If your thoughts revolve around them, what they said, what they did, what they might do, you are still investing emotional currency. But when you redirect that focus toward your own growth, your peace, your goals, you close the account they once accessed freely. Indifference is not coldness, it is clarity. It means you no longer feel the need to correct every lie. You no longer rush to defend your character. You no longer respond to every jab designed to provoke you. You recognize bait for what it is, and you refuse to bite. This shift transforms the power dynamic. Instead of them controlling the emotional temperature, you do. Instead of reacting impulsively, you choose stillness. Instead of proving your worth, you embody it quietly. And in that quiet withdrawal of attention, the very thing they crave most disappears. Narcissistic relationships often operate like emotional roller coasters. Intense highs followed by crushing lows. In the beginning, there is charm, admiration, overwhelming attention. You feel chosen, special, seen in a way you may never have experienced before. This phase creates emotional intensity that feels like connection, but it is often strategic attachment. Then slowly the shift happens. Criticism replaces praise. Distance replaces affection. Confusion replaces clarity. You start trying harder, loving harder, proving more, and without realizing it, you are no longer responding from strength. You are responding from attachment. This cycle forms what psychologists call a trauma bond. The brain becomes chemically conditioned to crave the unpredictable rewards. When affection is given inconsistently, it creates a powerful addiction pattern. The same neurological systems involved in gambling and reward anticipation activate in unstable relationships. You begin waiting for the good version of them to return. You tolerate mistreatment because you remember the early intensity. You hold on to potential instead of reality. The nervous system becomes dysregulated. Anxiety increases. Hypervigilance becomes normal. You analyze tone, text messages, facial expressions. You overthink everything. You blame yourself for their withdrawal. You believe if you just say the right thing or behave the right way, the harmony will return. This is not love, it is conditioning. When you decide to treat them as emotionally non-existent, you interrupt this neurological loop. You stop participating in the reward withdrawal cycle. You no longer chase validation. You no longer wait for breadcrumbs of affection. You stop trying to decode mixed signals. The addiction weakens because you are no longer reinforcing it. At first, it feels uncomfortable. Silence can feel heavy. Your body may crave the familiar chaos. You may feel urges to check their social media, replay old memories, or seek closure. That discomfort is not proof you need them. It is proof your nervous system is recalibrating. Healing often feels like withdrawal because you are breaking a dependency. By refusing engagement, you allow your brain to stabilize. Your cortisol levels drop. Your emotional reactivity decreases. You begin thinking clearly again. The fog lifts. The version of you that existed before the chaos slowly returns, stronger, wiser, more self-aware. When the trauma bond breaks, your perception shifts. You see manipulation where you once saw misunderstanding. You see patterns where you once saw isolated incidents. You see reality instead of fantasy, and clarity dissolves attachment. This is the moment power changes hands. They may attempt to pull you back in through apologies, promises, anger, or sudden affection. But without emotional access, their tactics lose impact. The cycle cannot restart unless you re-enter it. Breaking the trauma bond is not about hating them. It is about reclaiming your emotional autonomy. It is about reclaiming your emotional autonomy. It is about recognizing that intensity is not intimacy and chaos is not passion. The moment you stop responding to the highs and lows, the roller coaster stops moving, and when it stops, you finally step off. Control is the invisible currency in narcissistic dynamics. It is not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it hides inside subtle criticism, guilt, emotional withdrawal, or calculated kindness. The goal is rarely mutual understanding. The goal is influence over your emotions, influence over your decisions, influence over your decisions, influence over how you see yourself. When someone can shape how you feel, they feel powerful. Control thrives on access. If they can reach you, they can affect you. A text message that ruins your mood. A comment that makes you question your worth. Comment that makes you question your worth. A sudden disappearance that leaves you anxious. Each reaction confirms that they still hold psychological leverage. Even your attempts to prove your independence can become proof that they are still on your mind. When you treat them as if they no longer exist emotionally, you quietly revoke that access. You stop explaining yourself. You stop justifying your boundaries. You stop defending your choices. You no longer feel compelled to correct their misunderstandings or challenge their narratives. You simply detach. This detachment destabilizes the dynamic because control requires feedback. If they provoke you and receive silence, the strategy collapses. If they criticize you and receive calm indifference, the tactic fails. If they attempt to guilt you and you respond with neutrality, the emotional hook does not land, and predictability is another tool of control. Narcissistic personalities often study patterns. They learn what triggers you, what softens you, what makes you react. Once they understand your emotional rhythm, they can manipulate it. But when you become emotionally steady and less reactive, you become unpredictable. And unpredictability removes their strategic advantage. They may escalate when they sense control slipping. More dramatic messages, stronger accusations, sudden attempts at charm. This escalation is not strength. It is desperation. When control fades, insecurity surfaces. The illusion of dominance begins to crack. True power does not shout. It does not threaten. It does not need to prove itself. When you choose not to engage, you are not surrendering. You are choosing sovereignty. You are demonstrating that your emotional state is no longer externally managed. There is a quiet authority in someone who cannot be emotionally steered. You make decisions without seeking their approval. You pursue peace without announcing it. You live without reacting to their attempts to re-enter your psychological space. That calm self-possession creates a boundary stronger than any argument ever could. Without access, manipulation becomes impossible. Without access, control loses fuel. Without emotional visibility, their influence fades. And in that steady refusal to be moved, the balance of power shifts completely. At the core of narcissistic behavior lies a fragile self-concept carefully protected by ego. What appears as confidence is often compensation. What appears as superiority is often insecurity in disguise. Their identity depends heavily on external validation, how they are perceived, admired, feared, or discussed. Image is everything. Reputation is armor. Attention is proof of existence. Criticism can wind them, but it still acknowledges their importance. Conflict can anger them, but it still centers them. Even hatred confirms they matter in your emotional world. But indifference does something far more unsettling. It erases significance. It communicates without words that they no longer occupy space in your mind. Irrelevance is their deepest fear. When you stop mentioning them, defending yourself against them, or reacting to their narratives, you remove the stage they once performed on. They may attempt to provoke you publicly or privately to reestablish relevance. They might spread rumors, play the victim, or exaggerate stories. Not because they are strong, but because being forgotten feels like annihilation to someone whose identity depends on attention. For a narcissistic personality, invisibility feels intolerable. If they cannot control how they are admired, they will attempt to control how they are perceived. Positive attention is preferred, but negative attention will suffice. Silence, however, offers nothing, no reflection, no validation, no confirmation that they still matter. When you treat them as emotionally non-existent, you send a powerful psychological message. They no longer influence your reality. You are not seeking closure. You are not waiting for acknowledgement. You are not replaying their words in your mind. You are not measuring your worth against their opinion. That absence of reaction forces them into confrontation with themselves, something they avoid at all costs. Without external mirrors constantly reflecting admiration or fear, the internal void becomes more noticeable, and that void is uncomfortable. They may attempt sudden reappearances, unexpected apologies, dramatic messages, exaggerated success stories designed to impress you. These are often attempts to reclaim relevance. If you respond, even minimally, the connection reopens. If you remain indifferent, the message is clear. The chapter has ended. There is immense power in emotional closure that does not require mutual agreement. You do not need them to understand why you walked away. You do not need the mean to validate your experience. Your silence becomes your final statement. In a world where many fight to be seen, choosing not to see someone is a radical act. It says you have outgrown the dynamic. It says their presence no longer defines your emotional climate. It says your peace outweighs their performance. And when someone who once relied on being the center of your emotional universe becomes an afterthought, the shift is irreversible. Emotional intelligence is not about being soft. It is not about tolerating disrespect. It is not about endlessly understanding someone who refuses to understanding someone who refuses to understand you. True emotional intelligence is about awareness, regulation, and choice. It is the ability to feel deeply without being controlled by what you feel. In toxic dynamics, your emotions are often weaponized against you. Your empathy becomes something they exploit. Your patience becomes something they stretch. Your desire for harmony becomes something they manipulate. You begin reacting instead of choosing. You speak from frustration. You defend from hurt. You argue from exhaustion. Slowly, you lose the calm clarity that once defined you. When you decide to emotionally detach, you begin reclaiming that clarity. Instead of reacting instantly, you pause. Instead of responding to provocation, you observe it. Instead of absorbing criticism, you evaluate whether it even deserves space in your mind. This shift from reaction to response is the foundation of emotional maturity. It is the difference between being triggered and being aware of a trigger without surrendering to it. Psychologist Daniel Goleman emphasizes that self-regulation is one of the core pillars of emotional intelligence. Self-regulation means you are no longer externally steered. It means your emotional state is internally anchored. When someone attempts to provoke jealousy, guilt, anger, or insecurity, and you remain steady, you demonstrate mastery over yourself. That steadiness is powerful. It confuses people who expect chaos. It frustrates people who rely on drama. It unsettles people who depend on emotional reactions to feel significant. When you stop reacting, you are no longer participating in the emotional game. You are stepping outside of it. Reclaiming your emotional intelligence also means recognizing that not every statement requires correction. Not every accusation deserves defense. Not every misunderstanding needs clarification. Silence becomes discernment. Boundaries become calm, not combative. You begin investing your energy differently. Instead of analyzing their behavior, you analyze your patterns. Instead of asking why they did what they did, you ask why you tolerated it. Instead of chasing closure, you cultivate growth. Your focus shifts from them to you. And in that shift, something transformative happens. Your identity detaches from the dynamic. You are no longer the one who was hurt or the one trying to fix things. You become someone grounded, self-aware, and emotionally disciplined. There is immense strength in emotional composure. It communicates that your peace is not negotiable. It signals that your reactions are intentional, not impulsive. It proves that your emotional world is self-governed. When you operate from that level of awareness, manipulation loses its grip, drama loses its appeal, chaos loses its invitation. And what remains is something far more powerful than reaction, self-mastery. There is a profound shift that happens the moment you stop seeing yourself as the one who is wronged and start seeing yourself as the one who has authority over their own life. Narcissistic dynamics often condition you into a defensive position. You explain yourself repeatedly. You justify your boundaries. You try to prove your intentions were pure. You hope that if you communicate clearly enough, calmly enough, lovingly enough, they will finally understand, but authority does not beg to be understood. But authority does not beg to be understood. When you treat them as emotionally non-existent, you stop seeking validation from the very person who invalidated you. You stop chasing apologies that may never come. You stop needing them to admit what they did. Closure becomes internal, not negotiated. This is where the real transformation happens. A victim waits for acknowledgement. An authority creates it within themselves. When you reclaim authority, you no longer revolve around their perception of you. If they call you cold, you do not rush to prove warmth. If they label you selfish, you do not scramble to demonstrate generosity. If they rewrite the story, you do not fight to control the narrative. You understand that your truth does not require their agreement. This shift is deeply unsettling for someone who once influenced how you saw yourself. Narcissistic control often operates by shaping your self-image, subtle criticality. Schisms, comparisons, gaslighting, minimizing your achievements, magnifying your flaws. Over time, You may have questioned your memory, your worth, your reactions. You may have felt smaller. Authority reverses that contraction. You begin trusting your perception again. You trust your intuition when something feels wrong. You trust your boundaries without over-explaining them. You trust your decision to walk away without rehearsing it 100 times in your mind. And when you stop explaining, something powerful happens. You stop performing. You no longer perform strength to impress them. You no longer perform indifference to provoke them. You simply live, quietly, firmly, decisively. Authority is calm. It does not chase. It does not argue endlessly. It does not threaten to leave. It leaves. It does not announce boundaries repeatedly. It enforces them once. When you embody this energy, the dynamic collapses because there is nothing left to negotiate. You are no longer seeking fairness from someone who thrives on imbalance. You are no longer asking for empathy from someone who withholds it strategically. You are no longer waiting for growth from someone comfortable in denial.